As this Shabbos is what we refer to as Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos where we read the Krias HaTorah of Kali Yisrael singing the Shiras Hayom. So we have to understand the essence of Shira and the unique nature of Shira, what was so significant about Kali Yisrael's Shira, Ad Kedei Kach, that the Sforno tells us that the entire day of Shvi Shel Pesach, normally we don't have a Yom Tif at the end, we wouldn't have a Yom Tif at the end of Pesach. When it comes to Sukkot, we have a Yom Tif because we have Shmini Atzeres, but that we have Shavuos when it comes to Pesach, the Atzeres. So we wouldn't have a Yom Tif at the end of Pesach. The Sforno tells us, why do we have a Yom Tif? Because Klal Yisrael sang Shira. So you see that there's significance to this Shira in and of itself. There's something, the fact that Klal Yisrael sang Shira. Yisrael doesn't say because the nes of Krias Yamsuf. There are many nisim throughout Yitzias Mitzrayim. There are so many nisim. So it's not because of the nes of Krias Yamsuf. The Sforno says the reason we celebrate the Yom Tif of Shvi Shel Pesach is because Klal Yisrael sang Shira. So what was so significant? We would think Shira is a natural thing, right? Such a tremendous miracle happened for them. A Yeshua happened. So Shira was a natural reaction of Klal Yisrael. Why is this something that's considered to be so significant? What is it about Shira? If we understand the nature of Shira, so then perhaps we'll understand the significance. But really we could ask the question in a different way. It's very hard for me to believe that this is the first time Klal Yisrael sang Shira. You mean to tell me that they were sitting Leil HaSeder, the very first Seder, the Rebbeinu Shalom tells them that every one of the Becharim Mitzrayim is going to be destroyed. They hear Tza'akas Gedolos, their enemies totally being destroyed. They're sitting nicely, calmly around the table, singing to the Rebbeinu Shalom L'chaira. We have to assume they sang Shira. Our entire experience of Leil HaSeder is about Halal and Haidah. We have to imagine that Leil HaSeder in Pesach Mitzrayim there was Halal and Haidah. It's hard for me to believe that until Kriyas Yamsuf, until the end of Kriyas Yamsuf, that was the first time Klal Yisrael said Halal. So there is something unique about this Shira that the Rebbeinu Shalom says this requires a new Yom Tov. Something changed, something shifted in terms of the relationship between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Klal Yisrael. There are Svarim that actually expresses clearly, but we have to understand. They say that the concept that the Rebbeinu Shalom bought us as Avodim, that happened through Yitzias Mitzrayim in general. When did we become Banim Lamakom? We became Banim Lamakom, the Svarim tell us, by Shiras Hayam. So what was it about Shiras Hayam? So really we have to understand what prompted the Shira. Again, I'm assuming that there was Shira throughout Kriyas Yamsuf. It's hard for me to, throughout Yitzias Mitzrayim, it's hard for me to believe Klal Yisrael saw Dam, Tzardei, Akinim, Arav, and there was no Shira. But there's something unique about the Shiras Hayam. So what prompted that Shiras Hayam? So the Psukim tell us. The Psukim say that Vayiru Ha'am Es Hashem, right? They feared their Rebbeinu Shalom, and they were Ma'amin. Why? Vayaminu b'Hashem uveMoshe Avdo. Something changed in their emuna. It sounds, the Medrash says clearly, u'bizachos ha'amana she'aminu zachul loymar Shira. Something happened at Kriyas Yamsuf that shifted, that changed their emuna, and bizuchus, that emuna, they were zoicha to sing Shira. Again, you mean to tell me that Dam, Tzardei, Akinim, Orav, Dever, that didn't do it for their emuna? What Klal Yisrael had seen over the past year were nisim gluyim ad me'oid, right? It's impossible for us to imagine that this was a new level of emuna that they didn't have before. The belief was lacking until they saw Kriyas Yamsuf. Obviously, there's something more going on over here. We have to understand what this new level of emunah was, and therefore what was the reaction of Shiras Hayam. So I believe that it becomes very clear from a pasuk in the Shira, a pasuk that we're all familiar with, but let's try to take a deeper look at it. The Torah tells us that part of the Shira, Oz Yashir Moshe B'nei Yisrael Es Shira Hazois L'Hashem, Vayomer Leimer Shira L'Hashem Ki Ga'oi Ga'a Sus V'Rachva Rama Vayom Aziv V'Zir Maska Vayehi Li Li Shu'a Zekeli ve'anveyu Elokei avi ve'aroi mimenu. What does this mean? Zekeli ve'anveyu. So we have many different perushim throughout the different Mefarshei HaChumash. We know that Rashi brings from Onkelos that Zekeli ve'anveyu comes from the Lashon ve'anveyu of Noveh, a home, that we are going to build a Beis HaMikdash for the Rebbeinu Shalom. We're going to build an abode, a home for the Rebbeinu Shalom. But one has to ask themselves the question, why are we saying this right over here? Klal Yisrael over here are expressing their excitement over just what just happened on Yam Suf. So the first thing they say, Shira Lashem ki ga'o sus v'rachmav r'vam yam. The entirety of Oz Yashir is going to go back and discuss the experience of Krias Yam Suf. What does this have to do with building Beis HaMikdash in particular? That we say, Zek Keli Va'anvei, we're going to build you a Beis HaMikdash, we're going to get into Eretz Yisrael, and we're going to do Kibush V'chilek, and ultimately there's going to be a Shloimeh HaMelech that builds you a Naveh. Rashi brings a second parish, that Naveh doesn't mean abode, but Naveh comes from the Lashon of Noi, of Yoifi, and this is where we get the concept of Isna Lefanai B'mitzvahs, concept of Hider Mitzvah. But what's interesting to note is that while Rashi expresses this as two different shitas, really in the Mechilta you have a number of different Tanaim telling us, trying to figure out, struggling with the definition of Zeh Keli Vanveyu, and it seems they're giving different examples of how one accomplishes Vanveyu, meaning not necessarily that they're defining Vanveyu differently, but what Vanveyu means could be accomplished in different ways. And the Mechilta writes as follows: Rabbi Shmuel says, how are we supposed to beautify Kaviyachal the Rabbeinu Shalom? Elamai esnolifon of b'mitzvahs. If we make our mitzvahs beautiful, so somehow that will beautify the Rabbeinu Shalom. And again, concept of Hider mitzvah is familiar to us, but again, we have to ask, by me buying a nice esrog that makes the Rabbeinu Shalom beautiful, so we understand, we explain this to ourselves, well, if I'm doing my Avodas Hashem, I'm going above and beyond, that helps the Rabbeinu Shalom, but what does it mean exactly? What's a snarlefan b'mitzvahs? Zek heli va'anveyu. This is my Rebbeinu Shalom, and I will beautify him as snarlefan b'mitzvahs. And then the Medrash continues. Abba Shol Oimer, the Gemara brought him Masechet Shabbos. Abba Shol Oimer, nidmelahu loy mahu racham va'afat racham. You know what we learn out from Zek heli va'anveyu? V'halachta b'drachav. We learn out from Zek heli va'anveyu that I have to follow in the Rebbeinu Shalom's way. Where do I see that in Zek heli va'anveyu? Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer v'shimchu la'kadosh baruch Hu. Rabbi Yosef ben Durkamus Omer eselafon of mikdash, like Targum Onkelos brings. So each one of these mefarshi, each one of these Tanaim is struggling with the concept of Va'anveyu, and they're giving different ofanim, different ways to accomplish Va'anveyu. It doesn't sound from the Medrash that they're arguing on the language of what Va'anveyu means. It sounds like they're arguing on the best approach to accomplish Va'anveyu, and if that's the case, what does building Beis HaMikdash have to do with Hider Mitzvah? What does that have to do with Nidme Lefanav, compare to yourself to be like him, Mahu Racham, Afata Racham, Wahu Chanan, Avata Chanan. So what is going on over here? What does it mean? What is the essence of Zek Keli Vanveyu that all these Tanaim are trying to figure out that this is how we accomplish? So I think it's very, very clear. The episode of Krias Yam Suf sometimes is misunderstood. There is something very unique about Krias Yam Suf that Chazal tell us that we have to focus on, and I think this in particular is what changed the relationship Kaviyachal between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Klal Yisrael, and ultimately prompted a new type of Shira. We often view Krias Yam Suf to have been primarily an event of Yeshua for Klal Yisrael. However, we know that this is not the case. How do we know that this is not the case? The main experience of Krias Yam Suf was viewed, at least in the perspective of Klal Yisrael, as not a experience of Yeshua for Klal Yisrael, but rather an experience of Oynesh for the Mitzrim. It's quite clear towards the end of the parsha, where outside in a different context, Klal Yisrael are complaining that they don't have mayim, they don't have that they don't have water, and that they are thirsty. And the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe Rabbeinu, "Vayomer Hashem al Moshe avor lifnei ha'am v'kach itcha miziknei take v'yizakenim umatcha asher hakisa bo yes hayor," and take that stick that you hit the yaor. And says Rashi, what do you mean asher hakisa bo yes hayor? Says Rashi, based on Chazal, that Klal Yisrael were saying that this mata is miyuchad for piranhas. It only brings damage upon the world. Why? Because everything it's doing is punishing the Mitzri. What do you mean? The mata just split the Yamsuf for you. You see that in Klal Yisrael's mind, the Krias Yamsuf wasn't necessary for them to be saved. They could have gone straight. They didn't have to go in this semicircle. What was the Yesod of Krias Yamsuf? The entire episode of Krias Yamsuf for one reason only, and that was to destroy the Mitzrim. In fact, it's clear earlier in the parsha as well. We know that the Torah says, "Vayet Moshe yodo al hayam vayoshev hayam lifnei boker le'esano." The waters went back le'esano to its original form. Why le'esano? Chazal tell us litanoi. There was a t'nai b'maisa bereshis that there is going to be kriyas yamsuf. So if the t'nai in maisa bereshis that I'm only creating the world, I'm only creating the water is on condition that you split, so then that word le'esano shouldn't be when they come back and reform to their original way. It should be when they split originally. That was the Tanai. You see that the Tanai of Kriyas Yamsuf is primarily not the splitting which allowed Klal Yisrael to go through, but primarily the reformation when the water crashed back on the Mitzrim. Kriyas Yamsuf was primarily an oynesh for the Mitzrim, not a Yeshua necessarily for Klal Yisrael. But what was unique about this oynish for the Mitzrim, says the Medrash, is that every member of Klal Yisrael saw his specific Mitzri, exactly what had happened to him. The Mitzri that would stand over him day and night and torture him, that member of Klal Yisrael would see the suffering of that particular Mitzri. Imagine Lo Yaleinu, a person who suffered in the Holocaust, Rachmana Litzlan, and he saw a particular nikama that the Rebbeinu Shalom takes that German Yamach Shemoy in front of him and does exactly the things that he did to him all those years. Of course, it doesn't make up for it, but there's a certain hargasha when you see that. Zekeli vanveyu. The Rebbeinu Shalom is not just our Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom is my Rebbeinu Shalom. What changed at Kriyas Yamsuf was the first time Klal Yisrael, every member of Klal Yisrael, saw the Rabbeinu Shalom as their specific. Rabbeinu Shalom is not just guarding the Jewish people. The Rabbeinu Shalom was was watching me, and he saw each one of my tzaras, and he saw each one of my tears be shed, and now I see when he takes my nekama, not every members of Klal Yisrael, it's not dam, tzvardei, akinim, a global plague on the Mitzrim, but he took the Mitzri that tortured me, that tortured my family, and he brought him in front of me, and he gave him back, maka la maka, every single thing that he did. I saw the Rebbeinu Shalom take my nekama. So at that moment, every member of the Klal Yisrael felt the Rebbeinu Shalom is not only our Rebbeinu Shalom, but the Rebbeinu Shalom is my Rebbeinu Shalom. Zeh keli vanveyu. And that was Vayaminu Ba'Hashem V'Moshe Avdoi. For the first time, of course they had faith in the Rebbeinu Shalom, they believed the Rebbeinu Shalom, but the first time they were margish that the Rebbeinu Shalom is watching my specific tzaras, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to take care of my specific needs. That was first time at Kriyas Yamsuf Vayaminu Ba'Hashem. They realized they had a new level of faith in the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom cares about me and is watching over me in particular as individual, and therefore they sing Shira B'Lashon Yachid. It's not Noshir, it's Ashira L'Hashem. I am going to sing my specific Shira, Zekeli Vanveyu, Rashivcha Shabayam Shalai Roy Chezka Ben Buzi, Zekeli, this is my Rebbeinu Shalom. I know this was our Rebbeinu Shalom. I know the Rebbeinu Shalom had a promise to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that he's going to take us out of the Klal Yisrael, and I knew that the Mitzrim were going to be defeated, but I wasn't margish, I didn't feel that the Rebbeinu Shalom would be Toveya, my own Nikama. Zekeli vanveyo. This is my Rebbeinu Shalom. Zekeli ve'anveyo. This is my Rebbeinu Shalom. He cares about my tzaras. When Bechaya says Zekeli vanveyo, ani vehu. It's me and him. It's just the two of us. We have our own unique relationship. Zekeli vanveyu, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, imaya imcha noichi b'tzara. I'm with you in your tsar. There was a new relationship formed here, an individual relationship between every member of Klal Yisrael and the Rabbeinu Shalom that's being expressed. Zekeli vanveyu, ani v'hu. There's an element here of just me and the Rabbeinu Shalom. He was noikem nikmasi. He took my revenge. And this is what Chazal are trying to feel. The Tanoim are trying to figure out. How could we capture this feeling, this individual relationship that every member of Klal Yisrael should feel it? How do I capture this element of that the Rabbeinu Shalom has a unique relationship with me alone? And that I have a chelek in that relationship, and that I have a chelek elukam imal. My relationship is different than another Yid's relationship. So one Tana says the way to express this and internalize this is mahu rachem afator rachem. Realize that there's a chelek elukam imal, and you could be doimet to the Rabbeinu Shalom. And one Tana says build a Beis Hamikdash. You know why build a Beis Hamikdash? Because ve'osuli mikdash v'shechati b'soicham bilvavi mishkan evnes. As Rav Hirsch, it doesn't mean va'anveyu, and I will build for him a mikdash. Va'anveyu means, and I will house him. The Rabbeinu Shalom will dwell bilvavi. I have a unique relationship with him. And then, of course, as snow lefanei b'mitzvahs, hider mitzvah. What does it have to do with this? Because in general, we all put on the same tefillin. We all put on the same talis. We all blow the same shofar. But where do we have an element to create our own unique yachas with the Rabbeinu Shalom? Where could I express that my relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom is different, it's personal? Where does the Torah give us that leeway? That's hider mitzvah. And therefore, zekeli va'anveyu, how does it express itself in halacha? How do I express that I have my own unique chelek elokam imah, my own unique relationship with the Bari Olam? Mahu rachem afata rachem. You could act like the Rabbeinu Shalom in your way. Hider mitzvah gives you an opportunity to express your relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom unique. My esrog is different than his esrog. I have a unique relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom. But for me, a mitzvah's esrog is very, very important. For another person, it's his mezuzah, how beautiful his tefillin are, his talis. We each have our own way of connecting. Even though we have the same mitzvahs, the Rabbeinu Shalom gave us this leeway to beautify the mitzvahs so that we all experience the Rabbeinu Shalom as a klal, but also as an individual. That was the unique aspect of Shira Hayam. Of course, Klal Yisrael sang Shira, and of course they believed in the Rabbeinu Shalom before. But when they saw the Krias Yamsuf, that the Rabbeinu Shalom was watching them for all those 210 years, and the Rabbeinu Shalom saw every whip and every tear, and the Rabbeinu Shalom took nekama on every single tear that was shed, there was a unique relationship, intimate relationship that was felt. And that's what Klal Yisrael expressed. Even the Shivcha Shavayom. Zeh Keli. This is my Rabbeinu Shalom. This is not our Rabbeinu Shalom. This is my Rabbeinu Shalom. And Chazal say that's something that Klal Yisrael has to capture. How are we going to capture it? There are many different avenues. Some people will be Bilvavi Mishkan Evne, V'shachanti B'socham, will be able to develop that relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom in their life. Other people, it's going to be by understanding that they have a chelek elokam imal, they can mimic the Rabbeinu Shalom, mahu rachem, afata rachem. Other people will say the specific mitzvahs that speak to them specifically, they are going to beautify them, but it's all about the individual. That's what Shira is really about. Shira, Chazal tell us, really is a circle. The word Shira means a circle. Because a line, there's a different point, there's different places. Every person is at a different point. But a circle, every point along the circle is exactly at a equal measurement to the center of the circle. Each person has their own relationship. Equal, but different relationship. A Shira is expressed when a person feels that intimate, unique relationship. That's what Klal Yisrael saw at Krias Yamsuf. They saw that, Vayaminu B'Hashem. They realized our relationship is entirely different than what we thought. And b'schus that emunah, they were zoichet to sing Shira, they were zoichet to say, Zekeli v'anveyu.